Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mari McJilton. I am a research associate with the Urban Institute and the Justice Policy Center, and I'm going to kick us off. First, I want to welcome you to this webinar on New York City Wounded Healers, a cross-program study of credible messengers in New York City. Before we get started with the reason you came here, I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost, this webinar is being recorded. The reason for that is so we can post the recording on the Urban website for those who are unable to attend the live event. We have our closed captioning set to live. If you want to adjust those settings, just navigate to the bottom of your screen. It says live transcript with a little icon that says CC. Slides for this event are available on urban.org. All participants are muted currently. In order for us to get through the content we need, it's not the way we want it. We just have a limited amount of time together. We do prefer more of an active engagement type of session, but with just 1 hour and so much to get through, we are going to do most of the talking this time around. However, we do encourage you to use to put your questions and comments, into the Q&A box at any time during this session. Again, that's probably at the bottom of your screen. It's two little chat thought bubbles with Q&A spelled out. Finally, we do hope that you'll take some time at the end of this session to fill out a survey. It does help us at Urban and as a project team improve the webinars and events that we host for people like you. Will you go to the next slide, please? So why are we here? What are we covering today? First, we're just going to talk about our project. This project was a multi-pronged endeavor that lasted approximately 18 months. Again, we only have an hour today, so we are going to focus on one key part of this project, which is our cross-program study of credible messengers in New York City. We'll review our methods, our key findings, and recommendations for capacity building, both in New York City and more broadly. Finally, we'll leave some time for question and answer. Like we said, please post those as they come to mind throughout the session. However, we'll address them all at once after covering the content. Then we'll summarize this long path that we've been through together today and have some concluding remarks, including our next steps as far as some reports and a fact sheet that we have coming out for your use in future initiatives. Now, I'd like to take some time to introduce you to my team. This was not a one-person endeavor. It took everyone, all hands on deck, to accomplish this amazing work. Again, my name is Mari. I'm a research associate. I was one of the primary investigators on this project. And Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself and your role on the team, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Farrell. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I really worked on data analysis and came a bit late to the project, but I was super glad for every moment I got to share, and you'll see why as you get to hear the rest of introductions. I will pass it to Azar.
Hi everyone, my name is Azar Gulade. I'm a policy analyst in the Urban Institute Justice Policy Center. On the project, I was involved in the initial stages of literature reviews and such, and also our qualitative interviews and our survey, which we'll be talking about later in the presentation. And I'll pass it along to Mel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mel Langness. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a policy analyst in the Justice Policy Center at Urban. I've been on this project since the beginning. I'm including doing a lot of work around the survey, and I'm really excited for you all to hear about the work today. So I will pass to Rod.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to see so many of you. My name is Rod Martinez. I'm a research associate and also a co-primary investigator on the project. Like I said, it's good to see y'all, and I'll pass it over to Ramel.
Good afternoon. My name is Ramel Schuler, Community Research Assistant. I'm so happy to be here and be a part of this project. This definitely was a labor of love. I'm also a credible messenger. And with that, I'll pass it to Helen Skip.
Thank you, Amel. Greetings, everyone. So ecstatic and happy to be here. We are at the end of the push. Again, my name is Skip. I am a community research assistant at Urban. I've been on the project from the get-go. My pronouns are she, her, hers, queen. I am a peer. When I started this project, I was the senior manager of peer services at the New York City Criminal Justice Agency. I have now transitioned to the executive director of the New York City Justice Peer Initiative. Thank you. I will pass it over
to Champ.
Thank you so much. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Davon Champ Woodley. Everybody calls me Champ. Christ handles all my problems. I am a wounded healer. I am a research assistant. I am a criminal justice advocate. I am a social justice advocate. I am a community healer. And I am so excited to be here with you today to unpack all of this important information with you all. With that being said, I'll pass it off to Mari.
Thank you, everyone. Like we said, this was a labor of love. It took every single one of us in all shapes and forms at all steps of this project. So like I said, we're covering one aspect of our project today. However, we want to give you an idea generally of what this project entails. I'm going to pass it back to Skip to walk us through generally what activities we engaged in and why. Take it away, Skip.
Thank you, Mari. So as I said, my name is Skip. The most immediate lineage of credible messengers traces back to Eddie Ellis, a formerly imprisoned Black Panther who, along with others returning from prison, wanted to give back to his beloved community. Next slide. Originally, all credible messengers were defined as persons with lived experiences of being in prison who had transformed their lives to become agents of change in their communities. Their experiences, knowledge, and connections allowed them to connect with similarly vulnerable people in the community. Often through mentorship to young people, credible messengers emerge as an alternative to carceral approaches to communal safety and well-being. Nationally and locally, there's been a growing use of credible messengers in various contexts and serving a diverse array of groups by age and type of system contact. Although literature exists describing the history, meaning, and impacts of credible messengers, it's usually program specific, typically with results reaching only local communities. But for our project, a comprehensive review of the current landscape of credible messengers did not exist yet. It is crucial to understand their present use and contributions to effective programming and services and how best to incorporate credible messengers in future efforts. In response to this gap in knowledge, the New York City Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity funded Urban to conduct a cross-program participatory action research study of credible messengers. The purpose of this project was to document and understand the evidence base on the use of credible messengers in human services, the historical and systematic context surrounding the work of credible messengers, and the current landscape of credible messengers in New York City. Next slide, please. To achieve these objectives, between November 2020 and March 2022, we completed 4 tasks. We did a comprehensive review of literature. We hired community researchers onto the research team. We initiated the cross-program study of credible messengers in New York City, and now we're at the final phase, which is dissemination of findings and recommendations to stakeholders and communities. A participatory action, PAR for short, framework, which incorporates people closest to the research issue at hand into every stage of the research process, was central to our study. More broadly, we utilized community engagement methods, CEM, through the engagement of over 50 New York City stakeholders and key project activities and deliverables, including soliciting stakeholders' input in the literature review, cross-program inventory of agencies and organizations, workshop of preliminary findings, and the final report. As part of our PAR approach, we hired and trained 4 credible messengers as researchers on a project team and research organization to contribute and co-lead every component of this study. This research would have not been possible without their expertise and collaboration. As Mari said earlier, we'll be publishing a detailed report of all our project findings later in the spring. We're using our time today to generally discuss the methods, key results, key recommendations of the 3rd activity, the cross-program study of credible messengers in New York City. Next slide. I will now pass it over to Azar.
Thank you, Skip, for the introduction. As Skip mentioned, we'll be discussing the cross-program study, starting with the methods. Next slide, please. So to build upon further our understanding of the landscape of credible messengers in New York City, we conducted a cross-program study from August to December 2021. And this is mainly to investigate the following: the meaning and terms of credible messengers and lived experience, recruitment, training, and qualifications of credible messengers, the needs and challenges of credible messengers in the organizations that employ them, and collaborative efforts to these organizations throughout New York City. So these are the following things that we're trying to understand through our cross-program study. Next slide, please. So throughout this study, we conducted interviews with 3 case study organizations. These programs are identified as case study sites by the project team, mainly for following a few criteria, namely that they haven't been previously studied and they serve a variety of populations. Within these 3 case study organizations, we interviewed organization leaders, credible messengers, and people receiving services. And then to also get at a broader understanding of the landscape, we conducted an online survey of 30 organizations in New York City that utilize credible messengers. And so the topics covered in this survey mirrored the ones that we covered in our interviews, which is namely topics like services, successes, challenges, needs, and perceived impact of credible messengers. Then lastly, through this activity, we conducted interviews with city officials and stakeholders involved in credible messenger use to capture the higher level understanding of the landscape and systemic context in which credible messengers operate in New York City. And before we go on to discuss our findings, I just want to note some limitations. So we did seek to include as many agencies and organizations in New York City involved in credible messenger work as possible, although not all of them are represented in this project. And also we want to acknowledge that our findings are specific to New York City, since that's where our study was located, but we hope that some of this can be useful for the broader landscape throughout the country. And next, I'll pass it over to Rod.
Thank you, Azar. And so the first research question, next slide, that we were really trying to understand with this project is how exactly are credible messengers defined and how is lived experience defined? That's a key question as part of this work. Next slide. And so here we present some of the things that we heard that, that quote unquote make up a credible messenger. First is lived experience. We find that folks have generally expanded what it means to have lived experience to include folks who are actually directly impacted by the criminal legal system, but also people who are indirectly affected by the criminal legal system. Here, we also find folks describe street or gang associated folks as also having lived experience. People from criminalized communities, especially Black and Latinx communities, and even, right, and I think this is really important and interesting, as we make connections between other systems that are harmful, other systems, including the foster care system, also were included in people's definitions of lived experience. And so it wasn't just enough that folks had lived experience. We find in interviews with stakeholders that two other things are really important here. First, transformation. People spoke about the need for individuals to have undergone a transformation to become community agents of change, right? These are folks with a deep dedication, passion, and willingness to act on behalf of other people in the community, right? And then credibility. This was also really highlighted in our interviews. People spoke about how credibility really comes from the community, right? And not systems, not individual experiences of trauma, but that credibility comes in being recognized by your own community, right? As credible. And so again, we have lived experience, which is really important and has expanded over time. We have transformation, so folks needed to have undergone a transformation, and then community credibility. And then we also have some other things that folks spoke about, including strong communication skills, listening skills, empathy, mentoring experiences, and a deep commitment to the community was also really apparent in our interviews with folks. Next slide. And so the next question we had was around how are credible messengers recruited and trained now that we know the definition, right? Next slide. So we find that recruitment really happened through a number of informal channels, right? So this included talking to other credible messengers, right? Being out in the community and recruiting folks who might be good candidates for being credible messengers, word of mouth, right? Between agencies, right? A lot of this was really talked about informally, right? With, I think, really the reproduction of credible messengers themselves happening through other credible messengers, right? Or at least that being the actual hope, right, of what happens. And then we also have, of course, formal job postings that folks talked about. But when it came to qualifications, what's interesting, right? So we talked about the definitions, is that folks here really highlighted the fact that community credibility and lived experience are seen as the absolute most important elements of being a credible messenger. Formal credentials or training were really not viewed among stakeholders of different types as essential to being a credible messenger, and a successful credible messenger at that, right? That instead, it's really about how credible you are to the community you're serving, the people you're serving, and also the lived experiences that you come with to this work. Next slide. And so here we have a quote from a study participant who says, "To come from a place of vetting is starting from the wrong place. Instead, look for people who are already doing the work and trusted by other credible messengers." Next slide. And so when we asked about training, we found that access to available training and educational opportunities are needed for credible messengers, right? So that's not saying that there aren't already some of those things happening, but more of that is needed, right? And access to those things are needed. And so a few points on this are, first, it would be important to include more of these trainings or increase access, because credible messengers might become more competent in the current work, right, through a number of different skill attainments. It would help them address their personal and professional needs / goals, and it would also increase their ability to advance in their desired career, right? Next slide. And so the need for different types of skills can be really broadly categorized into two buckets, right? So first we have soft skills. We have things like communication skills, skills for emotional regulation, navigating boundaries, right? Whether that's personal or professional ones, understanding organizational culture, and taking supervisory and professional feedback. And then we also heard the need for hard skills, right? So training regarding trauma, including addressing their own, other folks, right? Based on the type of work that credible messengers do, population-specific training, including things like positive youth development, LGBTQA+ topics, and then some other hard skills included things like workplace / business skills, so things like time management, supervising, online calendar usage, email writing, grant writing, contracts, and business development. Next slide. And so I'll turn it over now to my colleague. Do you want to go, Lauren?
Yeah, thank you, Rod. So here we're just going to talk about the perceived impacts and challenges of credible messengers and the organizations that employ them. So next slide, please. So as we talked to study participants, there were 4 main perceived impacts of credible messengers that came out. The first is individual healing and community growth. Credible messengers mentor and empower people who are vulnerable to criminal legal contact and give them the support, tools, and resources they need to thrive instead of sending them towards imprisonment. Second is connections. Study participants also shared that credible messengers are instrumental in creating connections between communities, systems, and policymakers for conversations on improving services and policies. Third, public safety. Credible messengers are also reshaping community members' ideas of public safety through their relationship building with program participants and the larger community. They teach others not to rely on carceral systems like policing, and instead practice healthy communication, de-escalation, and community care. And finally, they bring awareness and teach their communities about the causes of criminalization and mass imprisonment. And they work to uplift the consciousness of shared experiences and systemic oppression instead of blaming individuals. Next slide, please. So one study participant said, "The serum is made from the venom. Credible messengers are effective in their name. They aren't doing something out of a book. They get the community and what it's like to go through something and overcome it. It is extremely important for someone who feels like they are going through something alone. Credible messengers are extremely valuable because they are the actual image of survival." Next slide, please. So study participants also shared 5 main challenges that credible messengers face. The first is stigma, systemic racism, and capitalism. Study participants reported that these 3 systems function to marginalize credible messengers and their work. As we know, people that are coming from incarceration situations are more marginalized already, and this, coupled with stigma, leads to people underpaying, underpromoting, and mistreating credible messengers in the workforce and beyond. Second, low pay and lack of benefits. Study participants reported that credible messengers are not paid a livable wage, do not receive raises annually, and are typically paid less than their non-credible messenger counterparts. Low wages and limited benefits force many credible messengers to work multiple jobs to support themselves and their loved ones. Third is funding barriers. There are 4 main challenges with funding, and you'll see they're related to the ones previous and the ones that come after. So the first challenge with funding is that it leads to low pay and benefits for credible messengers, as just discussed. The second is that it causes competition between community-based organizations rather than collaboration. And in this competition for limited resources, larger organizations are funded over smaller, more integrated community-based organizations because of this third challenge. And the third challenge is in requirements of funding. Study participants reported that performance measure and evaluation criteria used to gain and maintain funding are very challenging, which promote the funding of larger organizations who have more resources to create these proposals and follow the evaluation criteria. The fourth is that timing in which funding is executed hurts smaller organizations. This can often lead to the stoppage of services, but more commonly can lead to work without pay for long periods of time. Workplace and personal challenges. Study participants also reported that credible messengers face several personal challenges, including workplace culture and trying to gain technical and administrative skills expected in an office environment. We learned that while many organizations are hiring credible messengers, they are not adjusting their workplace cultures and supports to accommodate credible messengers. Lastly, study participants reported that there is an overwhelming emotional toll from the work that they do. Credible messengers need access to technical, financial, legal, emotional, and familial support above and beyond their non-credible messenger counterparts because of the life situations that they have faced, but these supports are currently difficult to access. Next slide, please. Thank you. One study participant said, We have people who are putting their lives on the line every single time they go out. To question their pay and their intentions is a disrespect. Health insurance, 401k, and all of those benefits are needed. They should be able to retire. They should be able to get sick and get care. They should be able to care for their families and themselves while doing the dangerous and impactful work they are doing. Next slide, please. And I will pass it to Mel.
Great. Hi, everyone. So one of our key research questions sought to understand whether cross-program partnerships and collaboration exist among the credible messenger and peer support field in New York City. Next slide, please. So study participants reported that New York City has many strong collaborative relationships. As one study participant explained, New York City pushes the limit by funding initiatives that might not be funded by others. Staff across agencies are connected with one another and are continuously communicating. However, these relationships consist mainly of city-level agencies and stakeholders. We learned that the city agencies who have long been involved in credible messenger initiatives communicate and collaborate often while creating opportunities for the organizations funded by them, such as the work on the crisis management system sites, Arches or AIM sites, and NEON sites. This includes the efforts as well created by implementing the Credible Messenger Justice Center. Study participants reported that, on one hand, this particular collaboration fosters knowledge sharing and support, but on the other hand, it can create unintended competition for resources and recognition. With that, they reported that the well-known collaboration and communication efforts generally include the same agencies and organizations time and time again, and efforts to identify and include new partners and perspectives are somewhat limited. Study participants reported particular silos regarding cross-field collaboration. So we learned that the city agencies and organizations within a given field, like public health, who typically communicate and collaborate, are largely unaware of similar or even sometimes identical efforts taken on by other fields, such as within the Department of Education, the Department of Labor, within universities, or even private corporations, and so on. These silos exist despite the fact that whilst these social service fields focus on different subjects, the issues they're working on are still very intertwined, which presents a key opportunity to think intersectionally and approach community needs from all angles. And we'll come back to this sentiment as we share study recommendations. And so for that, we're going to go ahead and go on to the next slide, please, and I will pass it to Mari.
Hello, thank you, Mel, and everyone. So yes, here we are. We've talked about what we did and what we found, but now where are we going? So as a result of all of this information that we collected from so many different sources, our team came up with 8 key recommendations for building capacity. Next slide, please. What do we mean by building capacity? We mean building capacity for credible messengers to grow both in magnitude of impact and in sustainability. So these recommendations that we're going to talk about are really for agencies and organizations that employ credible messengers as well as credible messengers, because as we found in our study, they transcend all roles in all fields at this point. Now I'm going to kick it over to Champ to start us off with recommendations. Next slide, please.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mari. Hello, everyone, again. I'm Woodley here, voting as a credible messenger and fortunate enough to be a research assistant on this amazing research effort. We'll just jump right into it. Next slide, please. Oh, increase. No, I'm sorry, go back. There we go. All right. Increase credible messenger pay, benefits, and support. Study participants evaluated the need for evaluated a need to create career leaders and increase the pay of credible messengers to a living wage that is equal to their non-credible messenger counterparts in the same or similar roles. What does that mean? I just want to unpack it for 1 second. A lot of these roles people play as credible messengers are part-time roles, no more than 20 hours, if that 30. The amazing part about this is that the people who are implemented into these roles love it so much to the point where they do it around the clock. If there's a mentee in need, if there's a client in need, and they call them with a crisis at 11:30 at night, they're going to wake up and they're going to respond, and they're going to be there for every last person on their caseload because they don't see it as such. They see it as people who are also dealing with trauma triggers, just like they are in everyday circumstances. The findings was previously highlighted in the Urban Institute's evaluation for the ARCHES program, and more recently, comprehensive work into intervention programs for at-promise youth. This need, youth notes this need. With that in mind, study participants reported that credible messengers, just like all the people, need access to affordable healthcare and retirement. As mentioned before, it is a part-time position 90% of the time. However, these benefits are reportedly difficult for organizations to offer because of their expenses. Yet such benefits are required for many city contracts. It is imperative that policymakers, funders, and organization leaders think creatively to establish affordable and quality healthcare and retirement for employees. For example, study participants suggested that policymakers and funders might allow city contracts to buy into city benefits for employees. Finally, employees might allocate time each week or each month for credible messengers to access training and support without taking time off. These things are very important. Second point, allowing for flexible funding for capacity building within and between organizations. Study participants evaluated the importance of flexible funding for training, collaborative efforts, and business development. This allows a person who may be formerly incarcerated 90% of the time, who typically does this role, wants to get deeper into this work, but may not have the necessarily on paper experience required for them to go to the next level for a promotion, a lateral move, or a position that carries the weight of a full-time role while still being a frontline worker. They muse that funders who allow organizations the opportunity to use portions of funding to increase capacity might increase the success of their initiatives. For example, allowing organizations to fund training and professional development might increase staff capacity for effectiveness. They might also increase the knowledge and resources sharing amongst the organizations with shared values and missions. Yes, next one. Reduce the time it takes to execute funding to organizations. A common challenge reported was the length of time it takes for New York City funding agencies to execute contracts, which impose a critical hardship for many community-based agencies. They suggested that by eliminating unnecessary steps, both by organization and by city streamlining processes, the time to execution can be reduced. For example, an online portal for the creation, review, and acceptance of contracts, task orders, and invoice might increase the speed of execution. With that, a system of accountability for organizations and city departments may also reduce delays. Lastly, introduce alternatives and healing-based forms of evaluation and performance measurement. Study participants reported a strong need to introduce evaluation data and outcomes that go beyond recidivism violations and dosage to truly understand the impact. Both qualitative and quantitative data is necessary to capture the true experiences of organizations and the people in which they serve. Next slide, please. Systems measure recidivism. It is more meaningful to measure relationship building, community healing, and secondary credible messengers. Look for social alike transformation through effective organization with individual and community transformation. This is coming from someone who is a study participant, who does work part-time and is able to capture exactly what we are here to speak about today so eloquently. I ask that you continue to hear thoughtfully, and we look forward to hearing more of your questions. With that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Ramel.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Ramel Schuler, credible messenger, and also a CEO of my own nonprofit. And the recommendations is to ensure the purpose of the work is driving the structure and processes of their organization. So in saying that, the purpose, not necessarily looking at a dollar amount or looking to grow an organization without feeding a particular purpose, and having people that are fit to fill that bill to develop the organization. That should be the focus, right? And we want to ensure that people that are developing their organizations look at structures that can support credible messengers, and in turn get the best out of these credible messengers to do this meaningful work. Like my colleague Champ said, some people that are credible messengers may answer a phone at 11:30 at night, and it's non-traditional work. And looking at a structure that would support that and highlight some of the non-traditional work is definitely important. Number 6 is be inclusive of people with lived experience to be employed in all roles of all fields, right? And being inclusive would allow insight to any particular situation that the common and set business structures won't accommodate. Most of the time you have, when you're working in a particular environment, everything is just black and white. It doesn't take insight. Some situations, and I won't say all because I haven't been in all circumstances, but the insight that it takes, sometimes some empathy, and sometimes understanding some of the traumas and other things that come with having someone with learned or lived experience can be a benefit. It definitely can give you some insight into troubleshooting a particular problem or ensuring that the quality of work is on another level, a higher level. Number 7, invest in credible messenger-led organizations and organizations who are truly a part of communities and who invest in community well-being. There's a famous quote, the people that are closer to the solution are the ones that's closest to the problem. And I know I'm probably slaughtering that, right? But in understanding that, knowing where to go, knowing your community, knowing who's really doing the work, and seeing where you can fit in at in a strategic way as a credible messenger to help the community develop is super important. The other side of it is that because of a credible messenger's background, it may hinder from other bigger organizations or government agencies. It may hinder them from investing into these credible messengers and some of the community based programming that that could assist the community in growing. And it's not the quantity of the work, it's the quality of the work. And credible messengers understand the importance of quality, usually from either receiving quality in service or because of their bad experiences in not receiving quality service and filling that gap, filling that void to people that will potentially receive quality service or any service in general. Increase collaboration between the city agencies, organizations, and communities. The crisis management system is probably one of the examples of this currently happening, but there should be a whole lot more of these collaborative efforts, because gun violence is only really one part of some of the ills of our communities. We have crime generative factors, which are few. It's maybe 8 or 9 different crime generative factors. And we need to have a multi-pronged approach in order to be effective in helping individuals who are credible messengers and organizations that support them in providing quality service and filling the gaps. Next slide. This is from a participant, a study participant. Check the motivation and what you are trying to achieve. This is not just a new boutique model that is cookie cutter. It requires a social justice motivation and application by communities for communities. It needs to be an authentic engagement. Young people are the last to change. The system, actors, etc., need to change first. Model the behavior, and I'm adding, model the behavior. And I think that what we're doing today is exactly that. And with that, I'll pass to Skip.
I actually think it's me. I think we
Yes.
are. Oh. Skip, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was saying it is you, Mari.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it can be you. It can be anyone. We are at that point in our presentation where we want to answer your questions. We have seen a few questions come in, I think up to 6 or 7, so keep sending them in. We'll just start from the top first. Dawn, thank you so much. You asked, can you talk about your research team, including the community researchers, was formed? Who approached who? How were decisions made within your research team? How did power dynamics show up in the project? And how were they addressed, et cetera? Thanks. So this is going to be a very, very short answer and a very short summary, because we detailed this line by line, very, very, very detailed in our final report, so that others who are interested in using participatory action research in their research initiatives or other action initiatives can learn from us and also use what is useful and adapt from our work. So first and foremost, we at Urban created a research team that consisted of everyone who is an expert in their own right. We have people from all walks of life, all ages, all locations. For example, I'm in Texas. So we have all of these great people who come from all different places, came together. We recruited as a job solicitation for the community researchers. The community researchers are Urban employees. They are part-time Urban employees who contributed to every aspect of this project, including planning, data collection, data analysis, and results determination, including those recommendations that we just went over. With that being so the power dynamics, it was, like I said, we're all experts in our own right. We did develop mutual mentoring relationships where each of our team members were paired with one another. Not typically, but mostly it was a community researcher with a full-time Urban researcher, so that we could learn from each other and work with one another on tasks throughout the project. Power dynamics, I believe, so we lay it out again in our report, but like I said, everyone made decisions, everyone was consulted every step of the way on the project, and everyone came together to share their expertise and come to consensus together. Now, Rod, do you want to take the question from Tate? And then we'll kick it to the team for 3 and 4.
Yeah, thank you, Mari. So, Tate, really good question. So, the question is, in terms of perceived challenges, did you talk to any folks who oppose using credible messengers as a strategy, or who have had negative experiences with them? The short answer is no. Does that mean that's happening? Absolutely not. It actually happens a lot, right? And that was one of the challenges that we hired. And that primarily has to do that we're talking about a primarily Black and Latinx working class, right? Poor working class group of folks with criminal convictions, right? And as a society, we really haven't evolved passing folks who have all of these really intersecting identities and experiences, right, as less than, right? However, again, we see that in the challenges that they face in their everyday work, right? We see that in their material conditions, including pay, right? So all that to highlight, right, that the folks that we spoke to, of course, really value, everyone that we spoke to really value what credible messengers do and who they are, right? I think the gap that we're really trying to showcase is that the need to materialize that, right? To materialize that, but of course, credible messengers, themselves experience challenges every day that speak to what you're saying of opposing their work, right? Directly and indirectly. And actually, I'll let some of the CMs, if they feel comfortable answering that question or circling back to the first one.
Hey, I can jump in. As a credible messenger and as a peer who utilizes my lived experiences, I want to say, first of all, that the minute we stepped onto the team, we were highly validated. And at the end of the day, the historic research that happens in what is considered to be marginalized communities always happens from the top down. No one includes the voices of those who are directly impacted by the research and are affected by the research. So what Urban did was momentous, in my opinion. We were welcomed, we were validated, we were recognized from day one as the subject matter experts. Every stage of this research, we were included. I am a budding researcher, and I learned so much from working on this process, from coding to use of software, to getting my certification to actually conduct research with human subjects. I think this is the dawn and the start of a brand new era. And like, I think it was Romel who said it, you cannot fix a problem without involving those who are closer to the problem. And I'll let one of my other partners jump in if they have anything else to say.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much, Skip and Romel. I really appreciate your answers authentically. I kind of just want to piggyback off of the two answers here. None of us felt used for gathering the information we were receiving from people who are in the same predicament or situations we are in or currently coming out of. We were treated like equals this entire process, this entire time. The way I found out about this information, this position here, was through CI, College Initiative. I know they changed the name recently, but I was a community justice peer navigator, and I graduated from that certification from John Jay, and they posted it specifically to anyone who was an alumni because they know they received the information. They know that they have the lived in experience, and they know that they really want to do the work. As I am here, as Skip is here, as Romel is here, we have all contributed to this work. I am a person who is not for numbers or data, but I've learned how important those things are when talking about things that are more subjective. I've learned how important it is for us to understand the difference between qualitative and quantitative data. And I've ultimately learned that we all here, even though we are serving as a level of privilege, are so well connected and rooted to those who are still in the front lines and still doing the work and still making it happen day in and day out.
I definitely agree with my colleagues too as well. A marvelous experience. It wasn't. It didn't seem intrusive or disingenuous in the work. So it takes a level of trust, especially with some of the situations that we've endured in some of our past, and being mishandled or misrepresented. This situation, this opportunity was not like that. And doing the work and seeing how this project is coming together is definitely exciting. It's fulfilling, and the team that we work with, Azar, Lauren, Rod, Mari, Mel, you know, awesome. I've learned from everyone, and this is something that's impactful, right? It changes. It kind of supports the trajectory of my new narrative, right? And it also gives us, and I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think that they may concur with what I'm saying. It's another tool in our tool belt. And it's also us continuing the struggle. And I thank you guys, and I thank everybody in the audience too as well.
Well said, Romel. Definitely agree with you. If I may, I'd like to answer one or two questions that I see popping up, if that's all right. So Nancy asked two questions. She said, what kind of additional supports might they need in the workplace and in work circumstances? And then she also asked, how do we support credible messengers to implement healthy boundaries so that they're not answering calls for help in the middle of the night? So going back to that initial question, the kind of supports that are needed are definitely to recognize this as a valid workforce. And just like any other workforce, we should impart career ladders. We should impart different levels of the work with promotional opportunities. We should have capacity building. And more importantly, we should continue to build upon the work. We should continue to have an appropriate pay scale. We're not talking about co-opting. We're not talking about sending people out on the street to do this type of work and not compensating them appropriately. We're talking about looking at the compensation levels. We're talking about looking at the benefit levels. We're talking about having them mirror any other position in a social service agency. At the end of the day, credible messengers often are marginalized because they're credible messengers. So we're often made to feel like we're not as good and as valid as licensed social workers or case managers or something like that. And this study showed that we are as valued, and we do the work, and we do work just as intentionally as anyone else. We work on different aspects. We do our work on a different plane. And then when Nancy asked, how do you support credible messengers to implement healthy boundaries? That's one of the beauties of the work we do when we work by our lived experiences. Boundaries that someone else might have are not what we have. We are intentionally tied to this work. As a peer supervisor, I tell my employees, Call me if you need me. My phone is always available because as a peer supervisor, I'm not just an administrative supervisor, I'm their peer. So if my workers are out in the street and they are in danger of being traumatized, they can pick up the phone and they can talk to me. And that helps with the re-traumatization. I can't really tell someone who is living this work, who is breathing this work, who is out there not for the pay, which we already know is not enough, but who is out there because they are feeling this work. Don't answer the phone when somebody calls you at 11 o'clock, because when you answer that call, you just might save someone's life. Credible messenger work with lived experience doesn't happen, begin and end from the hours of 9 to 5. This work goes on. And if you are intentional, if you are authentic, if the work is you and you are the work, it's always there. Thanks.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So just looking at the time, trying to respect everyone's time here. We promised you an hour. So we are going to move forward and just wrap up. We see that we did not get to everyone's question. This is not the end of the conversation by any means. So we'll provide our contact information here at the end in a couple of minutes. Write it down. Please reach out with specific questions about our project, about our study, about our people and our partners. We are happy to work with you, happy to talk with you, and happy to keep this work moving forward. So next slide, please. Where have we been and where are we going? We have had this diverse team, like I said, from all ages, all places, all experiences. We are all experts on this team, and we were all critical to the planning, the data collection process, and the results creation. This includes the city officials, system agents, community stakeholders, and leaders and community members that collaborated and coordinate us through every step of this project. This is especially true of our funder, New York City Opportunity. This large undertaking shed light on the evidence base for the use of credible messengers in human service programs, including the historical and systemic context surrounding credible messengers and the current landscape of credible messengers in New York City. In addition to this webinar, we have a full report, as we said, and a fact sheet. The fact sheet will be released today or tomorrow. We'll send that out to everyone who registered on the webinar with our slides and a link to the recording as well. Feel free to disseminate that information broadly to anyone you think would be interested in the information that wasn't able to attend today. We also have a final report coming out late April, early May, which, as we said, details line by line. It's a very big detailed report, all of the aspects of this project. Our work is meant to provide the groundwork for policymakers, funders, and organizations, credible messengers, and communities to increase the capacity of credible messengers and those who employ them, and to take the next step in their evolution. Our work only provides a glimpse into the extraordinary efforts, legacy, and potential of credible messengers in this world. The short of it, credible messengers save lives. It's now all of our responsibility to take that next step in ensuring their well-being and their futures. Now, as we conclude, I'd like to invite our grant monitor, Josh Serrano, to provide a couple of comments and some follow-up invitations. Next slide, please.
Thanks, folks. Sorry, my camera is giving some issues starting, but I just want to say thank you to everyone at Urban for the invaluable work on this study, and to all of you in attendance today. Our office, the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity, works to improve the systems of government by advancing the use of research, data, design, and program and policy development, service delivery, and budget decisions. Over the years, our office and the Young Men's Initiative have been proud to support implementation and evaluation of credible messenger programs here in New York City. With this study, we envision that with that vision, we selected the Urban Institute to conduct this research. And our hope for this study is that we can further the impact of this work by documenting the evidence base for the strategy. To that end, we did this study with the intention of putting the findings to use to strengthen this work. And we recognize that many of us in this conversation today are the folks who are best equipped, best positioned to make use of these findings and make the necessary changes. Therefore, we'd like to echo what's been said this entire time and close with an action item for all of us. Please reach out to us to continue this conversation and, importantly, to discuss putting any of the findings and recommendations in this study into use or using participatory research methods in your work. I'll drop my contact information in the chat. Thank you again to the Urban Institute team, to the community researchers, to all the city, provider, and other partners who've contributed to the study, and to all of you for joining today. We're really looking forward to hearing from you.
With that, thank you everyone for sharing this last hour with us and for all of your useful questions. Again, please reach out to us if you have any other follow-up questions or needs whatsoever.
Thanks, Joe.